The morning sun had barely risen over the Canadian wilderness when Mark Thompson noticed something was wrong. The birds had stopped singing, and a strange humming filled the air. Looking up from his morning coffee on the cabin porch, he saw it, a streak of blue fire cutting across the sky. Mark wasn't the type to ignore strange events. After 15 years as a wilderness survival expert and former paramedic, his instincts had saved many lives. He grabbed his emergency medical kit and headed toward where he thought the object would land. The crash site wasn't hard to find. Whatever had fallen had cut a long path through the forest, leaving broken trees and scorched earth in its wake. At the end of this trail lay a silver pod about the size of a small car. Steam rose from its surface, and strange symbols glowed along its side. "Hello," Mark called out, keeping a safe distance. "Is anyone there?" A weak bang came from inside the pod, followed by what sounded like a groan. Mark's medical training kicked in. Someone was hurt, and they needed help. He approached carefully, looking for a way to open the craft. The pod's surface was hot but cooling quickly. Mark found what looked like a handle and pulled. With a hiss of escaping air, a section of the pod slid open. What he saw inside made him freeze. It was definitely not human. The creature inside was clearly female, but she stood at least 8 feet tall, with iridescent scaled skin that shifted colors in the morning light. Her muscular frame was covered in what looked like battle armor, now damaged and sparking. But what caught Mark's attention were her eyes. Bright amber, filled with intelligence and pain. She was badly hurt. Purple blood seeped from several wounds, and her breathing was labored. The warrior tried to speak, but only managed a series of clicks and growls before losing consciousness. Mark didn't hesitate. Alien or not, she needed help. He started treating her wounds using his medical supplies, thankful that basic first aid seemed to work on her physiology. The scaled skin was tough but flexible, and her blood clotted much like a human's. As he worked, Mark talked softly, more to calm himself than his patient. "Don't worry, big girl. I've got you. Just stay with me." The warrior's eyes fluttered open occasionally, watching him work with a mixture of confusion and curiosity. Once, she reached out with a 3-fingered hand and touched his face gently, as if making sure he was real. It took hours to stabilize her. Mark had to make several trips back to his cabin for supplies, but he wouldn't leave her alone for long. By sunset, he had managed to clean and bandage her major wounds and set up a makeshift shelter around the pod. The warrior was now conscious but weak. She watched Mark's every move as he prepared a small fire nearby. When he offered her water, she sniffed it carefully before drinking. Her movements were precise, even injured, suggesting years of combat training. That night, under the stars, Mark wondered what he had gotten himself into. Here he was, treating an alien warrior twice his size, with no way to communicate and no idea if more were coming, friend or foe. The warrior made a sound that might have been a word. When Mark looked at her, she placed her hand over her chest and said something that sounded like Vex. "Vex," Mark repeated, pointing at her. She nodded. Mark pointed to himself. "Mark." Vex tried to say his name, but it came out more like Mark. She seemed pleased with herself, then winced as the movement aggravated her wounds. As Mark checked her bandages one last time before trying to get some sleep, he noticed something odd. Despite her injuries, Vex was smiling at him. There was something in that smile that made him wonder if his life was about to change in ways he never could have imagined. He had no idea how right he was. Getting an 8-foot-tall alien warrior into his cabin was not something Mark had planned for when he built the place. After 3 days at the crash site, Vex's wounds were healing well enough to move her, but the journey was still tricky. "Easy now," Mark said, supporting her massive frame as they walked slowly through the woods. Vex's armor clinked with each step, and her scaled skin shifted colors with the effort of walking. Sometimes purple, sometimes blue, like a mood ring the size of a person. The cabin's doorframe posed the first challenge. Vex had to duck, and turned sideways to fit through it. Once inside, she looked around with wide amber eyes, taking in everything. Her gaze stopped at the fireplace, and she made a sound that might have been approval. Communication was still mostly gestures and drawings. Mark had found a whiteboard, and they spent hours drawing pictures to share ideas. Vex was smart. She picked up new words quickly, though her mouth struggled with some human sounds. One morning, while changing her bandages, Mark learned more about why she crashed. Vex drew a picture of several ships in space. Then she drew what looked like pirates attacking her ship. Her face darkened to a deep red color as she drew this, which Mark had learned meant she was angry. "Pirates?" Mark asked, pointing at the drawing. Vex nodded. "Pirates," she repeated, then made a slashing motion across her throat. The meaning was clear. Space pirates were bad news. Living with an alien warrior led to some interesting situations. Vex was fascinated by everything in the cabin, especially the kitchen. She watched Mark cook with intense concentration, but when he offered her some scrambled eggs, she sniffed them and backed away like they might attack her. Instead, she pulled something from a compartment in her armor. Small, glowing blue cubes that looked like jelly. She popped one in her mouth and offered one to Mark. "Are you sure?" he asked, studying the strange food. When she nodded, he tried it. It tasted like honey and starlight, if starlight had a taste. His whole mouth tingled pleasantly. 1 week into their unusual living arrangement, Mark discovered something surprising about Vex's species, the Krell. He had been showing her pictures of his family on his phone, explaining about mothers and fathers. Vex became very excited and drew a picture of her own people, lots of male warriors, but very few females. "Few females?" Mark asked, pointing at the drawing. Vex nodded seriously. She drew more, showing that female Krell were highly respected warriors and leaders. Then she drew herself, standing proudly in what looked like ceremonial armor. Their days fell into a routine. In the mornings, Mark would check Vex's wounds, which healed incredibly fast. Then they would work on language, with Vex learning English, much faster than Mark could learn Krell clicks and growls. In the afternoons, once Vex was stronger, she insisted on helping around the cabin. Though she had to duck under doorways and some tasks were comically difficult with her size, she was determined to be useful. She was especially good at chopping firewood. Her strength made quick work of the task. But it was the evenings that became special. They would sit by the fire, and Vex would tell stories through drawings and gestures about her life among the stars. Sometimes she would sing strange, beautiful songs in her own language, her voice surprisingly soft for such a large warrior. Mark noticed she was watching him more and more, especially when she thought he wasn't looking. There was something in her amber eyes that he couldn't quite read, but it made his heart beat faster when he caught her gaze. What he didn't know was that Vex had already made an important decision about their future, one that would change both their lives forever. Mark knew something was different when he woke up to find his living room completely rearranged. Vex had pushed all the furniture against the walls and was busy building what looked like a nest in the center of the room. She had gathered every blanket, pillow, and soft item she could find. "Vex," he asked, scratching his head in confusion, "what are you doing?" The alien warrior's scales turned a bright pink color, something Mark had never seen before. She stood up straight, nearly bumping her head on the ceiling, and spoke in her now improving English. "Mark brave, Mark gentle, Mark smart." She pointed at her creation. "This nest for us." Mark blinked several times, trying to process what was happening. "A nest for us." Vex nodded enthusiastically. Then she pulled something from her armor, a small crystal that glowed with a soft blue light. In Krell culture, she explained through drawings and broken English, warriors gave these crystals to their chosen mates. "You want me to be your mate?" Mark asked, his voice rising in surprise. "Yes." Vex's scales rippled with colors of gold and pink. "You save me, care for me, Show great strength and wisdom. She tapped her chest. Krell females, choose mates. I choose you. Mark sat down heavily on the couch, which was now pushed against the wall. This was not how he expected his morning to go. But I'm human, he said. And you're different. Vex finished for him. Her expression became serious. Differences make us strong. You teach me human ways. I teach you Krell ways. She gestured at her nest proudly. First step, building home together. Throughout the day, Vex continued her courtship rituals. She presented Mark with small gifts she had crafted from pieces of her damaged armor, beautiful metallic objects that seemed to glow from within. She also demonstrated her hunting skills by catching a deer with her bare hands, which was both impressive and slightly terrifying. Mark found himself both amused and touched by her efforts. When Vex tried to cook the deer for him, after watching him cook several times, the result was hilariously charred on the outside and raw on the inside, but her disappointed face made his heart melt. Here, he said, moving beside her at the stove. Let me show you how. As they cooked together, Vex explained more about Krell mating customs. Female warriors were treasured not just for their rarity, but for their wisdom in choosing mates who would help raise strong children. The nest building was just the first step in a complex courtship process. But what about your people? Mark asked. Won't they object to us? Vex's scales darkened slightly. Some will not understand. But Krell respect female choice is our law. She looked at him with those intense amber eyes. You worry about size difference. Mark laughed. Well, yes, that too. Vex grinned, showing her slightly sharp teeth. Size not matter. Heart matters. Mind matters. She placed her large hand gently over his chest. Your heart strong. Your mind clever. That evening, as they sat in Vex's nest, which was actually quite comfortable, she taught him a Krell courtship song. It was full of clicks and rumbles that human vocal cords couldn't quite manage, but she seemed delighted by his attempts. Tomorrow, she announced, I teach you Krell warrior dance. Mark's eyes widened. Dance. Yes, very important part of courtship. She stood up, demonstrating a move that made the whole cabin shake. Shows strength and grace. Looking up at his alien warrior, who was now attempting a complicated dance move in his small cabin, Mark couldn't help but smile. His life had become completely bizarre, but somehow it felt right. Just then, Vex lost her balance and crashed into the bookshelf, sending books flying everywhere. Her scales turned bright pink again as she looked at him sheepishly. Maybe we practice dance outside, she said. Mark couldn't help but laugh. Life with Vex would never be boring, that was certain. The peace of Mark and Vex's budding relationship was broken early one morning by a sound that made the windows rattle. 3 massive ships appeared in the sky above the cabin, their hull designs similar to Vex's escape pod. My people come, Vex said, her scales shifting to a deep blue color that Mark had learned meant worry. She stood protectively in front of him as the ships landed in the clearing near the cabin. The ships were much larger up close. The middle one opened first, and out stepped 5 Krell warriors, each as tall as Vex but more heavily built. Their armor gleamed in the morning sun, covered in symbols of rank and achievement. The lead warrior, wearing golden armor, stepped forward. Commander Vex, he boomed in the Krell language. Then he spotted Mark and froze. Vex spoke quickly in their language, gesturing to Mark, and then to her healed wounds. The other warriors listened, their expressions moving from shock to curiosity. Mark wished he could understand more than the few Krell words he had learned. The golden-armored warrior switched to rough English. You helped our commander. Yes, sir, Mark replied, trying to stand tall despite feeling very small among the giants. I found her crashed ship and treated her injuries. Just as the tension seemed to be easing, another sound filled the air. A high-pitched whine that made everyone look up. 3 black ships appeared, their designs sleek and predatory. Space pirates. Vex growled, her scales turning angry red. They follow rescue signal. The pirate ships opened fire without warning. Energy bolts struck the ground around them, sending dirt and rocks flying. The Krell warriors immediately moved into defensive positions, but they were caught in the open. "Into forest," Mark shouted, pointing to the thick trees. "They can't target well through the canopy." The Krell warriors looked to Vex, who nodded firmly. "Trust Mark. He knows this land." They ran for the forest cover, energy bolts striking behind them. Once under the trees, Mark took the lead. He knew every trail and hidden spot in these woods. "This way," he directed, leading them to a narrow ravine. "The ships can't fit down here, and the rocks will give us cover." The pirates had landed and were pursuing on foot. They were a mix of different alien species, all carrying advanced weapons, but they hadn't counted on fighting in Earth's terrain. Mark whispered to Vex, "Remember when I showed you how to set traps for deer?" Vex's eyes lit up. She quickly explained to her warriors, and they spread out, using their strength to bend young trees into spring traps, just as Mark had taught her. They covered them with leaves and waited. The pirates walked right into their trap. Trees snapped up, catching several pirates in nets made of vines. The others found themselves being picked off one by one as the Krell warriors used the forest's natural cover to their advantage. The golden armored warrior watched in amazement as Mark and Vex worked together, using a combination of Earth tactics and Krell strength to outmaneuver the pirates. When Mark used a fallen log as a lever to topple a large rock onto a pirate's position, the warrior nodded approvingly. After a short but intense battle, the remaining pirates retreated to their ships and fled. The forest was quiet once again, except for the sound of celebrating Krell warriors. The golden armored warrior approached Mark and Vex. "I understand now," he said in his rough English, "why Commander Vex chose you as mate." He looked at Mark with new respect. "You have warrior spirit. Use mind as weapon. Very Krell." But then his expression grew serious. "But Council must still approve. Not easy. Never been human Krell mate before." Vex stood close to Mark, her scales showing a mix of proud gold and worried blue. "We go to Council together," she declared. "Show them what we can do together." Mark took her large hand in his. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them as one. The forest had shown that their differences made them stronger, not weaker. The Krell warriors began heading back to their ships, but the golden armored one turned back one last time. "Pack for long journey," he said. "Council far away. Many stars from here." Mark looked at his small cabin, then at Vex. Space travel wasn't exactly what he planned for this year, but then again, neither was falling in love with an alien warrior. Space travel was nothing like Mark had imagined. The Krell ship was huge, with corridors built for warriors twice his size. Everything was made of gleaming metal that seemed to change color under different lights. But they weren't safe yet. Pirates following. A Krell warrior shouted from the control room. 3 ships. More coming. Vex grabbed Mark's hand and pulled him toward the bridge. Her scales were flickering between battle red and worried blue. Pirates want Krell technology. Very valuable. They not give up easy. The main screen showed 5 pirate ships now, gaining on them fast. The golden armored warrior, who Mark learned was named Rex, turned to them. They block path to Council world. Must fight. That's when Mark had an idea. "Wait," he said, pointing at the map display. "What's that?" He was indicating a nearby solar system with several gas giants. Vex looked where he pointed. Gas giants. Very dangerous. Strong storms. Magnetic fields. Perfect. Mark smiled. On Earth, hunters sometimes use the environment against stronger prey. Can this ship handle those storms? Rex caught on quickly. Krell ships, yes. Pirate ships, maybe not. Their shields weaker. They changed course, heading straight for the largest gas giant. The pirate ships followed, just as Mark hoped they would. As they entered the planet's upper atmosphere, the ship began to shake. Like Earth hurricane, Mark explained to Vex, but much bigger. We can use storm patterns to our advantage. Vex quickly translated Mark's suggestions to the crew. The Krell ship dove deeper into the gas giant's storms, where massive lightning bolts could destroy a ship's shields. The pirates followed, but they were starting to struggle with the intense conditions. There, Mark pointed at a massive storm cell on the sensors. If we time it right, we can use that storm's rotation to slingshot around while they get caught in it. The Krell pilots were skilled. They rode the edge of the storm while the pirate ships, trying to follow, got pulled into the powerful vortex. Two of their ships collided, their shields failing in brilliant flashes of light. But the pirates weren't done yet. The remaining ships launched fighters, small, fast craft that could better handle the storms. One of them managed to hit their ship with an electromagnetic pulse. Weapons offline, a warrior shouted. Shields at half power. That's when Vex stepped up. Mark, she said, remember trap in forest? We do same here. Mark grinned as he understood. They turned their ship toward a massive field of floating ice crystals, leftover chunks from the planet's rings. The fighter pilots, focused on chasing them, didn't see the trap until too late. The Krell ship fired its engines at full power, sending the ice crystals flying backward like a shotgun blast. The fighter craft couldn't dodge in time. Their smaller shields collapsed under the barrage of ice. The remaining pirate ships, seeing their fighters destroyed and their quarry proving too clever, finally retreated. The bridge erupted in cheers. Krell warriors lifted Mark onto their shoulders, celebrating his strategy. Rex approached them after things calmed down. Council will hear of this, he said proudly. Human and Krell, working together, making both stronger. Vex's scales glowed with happy gold colors as she hugged Mark. See, she said, different not mean weak. Different mean new ideas, new strength. As they set course for the council world, Mark looked out at the gas giant's swirling storms. He had just helped fight a space battle using hunting tricks he learned in the Canadian wilderness. Life had become more amazing than any story he could have imagined. What you thinking? Vex asked, seeing his thoughtful expression. Just wondering what other adventures we'll have together, he replied. Vex's scales rippled with loving colors. Many adventures, she said. First, we face council. Then, she patted her chest armor where she kept the glowing crystal she had given him. Then we start our own family story. The Krell ships sail on through space, carrying them toward their next challenge. But now the crew looked at Mark differently, not as a strange human, but as a warrior who thought differently and made them stronger because of it. Their victory had proved what Mark and Vex already knew. Love doesn't care about what world you're from, only what's in your heart. The Krell Council chamber was the biggest room Mark had ever seen. Massive pillars rose into darkness above, and the walls glowed with shifting colors like Vex's scales. 12 council members sat in a half-circle, each at least 9 feet tall, wearing ceremonial armor that sparkled under the strange lights. Commander Vex, the head council member, spoke in perfect English. You wish to take this human as your mate. Vex stood proudly beside Mark, her scales shimmering with determination. Yes, honored elder. Mark Thompson saved my life, fought beside me, and shows the true spirit of a Krell warrior. An older council member leaned forward, his armor creaking. But he is so small. How can he protect you? How can he help raise strong Krell children? Mark stepped forward, trying not to feel intimidated. With respect, strength isn't just about size. On Earth, we have tiny ants that can lift 50 times their weight, small wolves that survive in the coldest places. Intelligence, adaptability, and courage matter more than size. This caused a stir among the council. They hadn't expected the human to speak so boldly. Rex, who had come to support them, added his voice. I have seen this human turn a forest into a weapon. He used a gas giant's storms to defeat pirates. He thinks in ways we do not. That is his strength. The council whispered among themselves. Then a female council member spoke. Show us how you would raise a child together. Demonstrate your understanding of each other's cultures. Vex and Mark looked at each other, nodding. They had practiced for this. Vex went first, showing how she had learned Earth customs of gentleness and patience. She carefully picked up a delicate crystal flower, demonstrating control of her great strength. Then Mark demonstrated Krell warrior traditions Vex had taught him. He performed a complex honor ritual, his movements precise and respectful. When he spoke the ancient Krell words, several council members nodded approvingly. But what of your children? Another council member asked. They will be neither fully human or fully Krell. That is their strength, Vex replied. They will have human cleverness and Krell power. They will bridge our worlds. Her scales glowed with passionate colors as she spoke. Mark added, on Earth, we have a saying, unity in diversity. Different plants grow better together than alone. Different animals work together to survive. Our differences make us stronger. The head council member raised his hand for silence. Never before has a Krell warrior chosen a human mate. But never before has a human shown such understanding of our ways. He paused, looking at them both. Commander Vex, you were always one of our most innovative warriors. Perhaps it is fitting that you break new ground here as well. The chamber grew quiet. Even the glowing walls seemed to dim as everyone waited for the final decision. We have reached our decision, the head council member announced. This union will be allowed under one condition. Mark and Vex held their breath. You must establish a cultural exchange program. Your home will become a place where young Krell warriors can learn human adaptability, and where humans can learn Krell strength. You will be bridge builders between our peoples. Vex's scales erupted in joyful colors, and she lifted Mark high in the air, spinning him around. The council members watched with amusement as this tiny human and massive warrior celebrated their love. One more thing, the female council member added with a smile. Your cabin will need some renovations. Standard Krell doors are much bigger. The chamber filled with laughter, a mix of human chuckles and Krell rumbles. As Mark and Vex left the chamber, other Krell warriors came to congratulate them. Many seemed excited about the idea of learning human ways. See, Vex said softly to Mark as they walked together. Big changes start with small steps. Mark squeezed her hand, and sometimes with a crashed spaceship in the Canadian wilderness. They had done it. Their love had opened a door between two worlds. Now they just had to figure out how to build a family that would walk through that door. 1 year had passed since the council's decision. Mark's cabin in the Canadian wilderness had changed dramatically. The small wooden structure was now connected to a larger Krell-sized building, creating a unique blend of human coziness and alien engineering. Mark stood in their expanded living room, watching Vex teach a young Krell warrior how to whittle wood, a human craft that required control and patience. Her scales glowed with teacher's pride as the student carefully carved a small bear. Gentle hands, Vex instructed, like holding earth flower, strong inside, soft outside. Through the window, Mark could see 3 human students practicing Krell combat moves in the clearing. Their teacher, Rex, had become a regular visitor and instructor at what they now called the Bridge Academy. But the biggest change in their lives lay sleeping in the nursery. Their daughter, Luna, born 3 months ago, she was a perfect blend of both worlds. She had Vex's iridescent scales, but they were softer, more like human skin. Her size was between human and Krell, and her eyes shifted between Mark's green and Vex's amber. Time for feeding, Vex said, hearing Luna's soft coos through the monitor. She had learned to move quietly despite her size, something that still amazed her fellow Krell. Mark followed her to the nursery. Watching Vex with Luna always made his heart swell. The mighty warrior who could break trees with her bare hands now handled their daughter with incredible gentleness. Luna's scales rippled with happy colors when she saw her parents. She had inherited the Krell's color-changing ability, which made it very easy to know her moods. Right now, she was showing peaceful blues and loving golds. Earth song or Krell song tonight? Mark asked as Vex picked up their daughter. Both. Vex smiled. She is child of two worlds. They had created their own lullaby that mixed human words with Krell harmonies. As they sang together, Luna's scales shifted to match the colors of the aurora borealis that often danced above their home. Later that evening, as their students gathered around the giant dining table they'd built together, Mark looked at the family he'd created. Humans and Krell sat side by side, sharing stories and food from both worlds. Some humans were trying to learn Krell click speech, while young Krell warriors practiced using human-sized utensils. Remember when you first crashed here? Mark asked Vex as she sat beside him. Did you ever imagine this? Vex's scales showed the deep, rich purple of contentment. No. Imagine dying alone in strange world. Instead, found love, family, purpose. She looked at Luna, who was fascinated by the lights reflecting off her own scales. Found future. A young human student raised her hand. Commander Vex, could you tell us again how you and Mark defeated the space pirates in the gas giant? Yes, a Krell student grumbled. Tell about human clever tricks and Krell strength working together. Vex laughed, a sound that mixed Krell clicks with human warmth. Mark tells story better. He adds, what you call it? Drama. Mark started the tale, with Vex adding her parts in both English and Krell. Their students listened with wide eyes and shifting scales, learning not just about space battles, but about how different cultures could work together. As the story ended, Luna let out a happy squeal, her scales flashing with excitement. Everyone laughed, and Mark realized that this wonderful, impossible family had started with a simple act of kindness in the wilderness. What you thinking? Vex asked softly, seeing his thoughtful smile. Thinking about how sometimes the best families are the ones we never expected, he replied, holding her large hand in his smaller one. And how love doesn't care about what planet you're from. Luna reached out with her tiny hands, one toward each parent. Her scales showed a perfect blend of their colors, a living symbol of their united worlds. Outside, the northern lights danced across the sky, their colors matching Luna's scales. Inside, human and Krell voices mixed in harmony, creating a new kind of family song, one that would echo across the stars for generations to come. The end.